Hello everyone, this is Anton and
Erin.
welcome to a new conversation that we're going to have here right after lunch on a cold afternoon here in Jackson, Tennessee. We're sitting at our kitchen table and the coffee is sizzling right there. And we are ready to talk about, in this case, we're going to be talking about a movie. We've done a couple of conversations like this before. The previous one was about The Haunting of Hill House, that TV show and book as well. And the first one had been about Farinha, or Cocaine Coast, the show that centered around the drug smuggling in the northwest of Spain. But we're going to be talking about something perhaps a little lighter this time around. And it's a movie that we went to see not too long ago at the movie theater not too far from our house here in Jackson. And we actually went originally because of our daughter Libby. She wanted to watch this movie. She'd watched the original one countless times, especially on the iPad while we were driving down the highway going to different places in the United States. And we heard about this new movie which was seen as something of a sequel of sorts, and we said we have to go watch this, but we wanted to do it mostly for her. Now, the movie is called Mary Poppins Returns, and it was released just a few weeks ago, towards the end of 2018. And as we approached the movie, even before we started talking about it, what was your opinion? What was your view of the movie before we actually went to see it? After we'd seen maybe a trailer or so, we'd heard about it. Erin, what did you think the movie was going to be like?
Well, you know, it's one of those classic movies that have become such a part of, you know, American movie culture, Disney movie culture, that I think it's hard to imagine it being remade. Obviously, there have been movies connected to Mary Poppins, like Saving Mr. Banks, and that have come out. And, you know, not to say that that movie was perfect, but I know P.L. Travers did not care for what they ended up doing to her book. But it has become a classic, and it's hard to imagine it being remade. It's
Were your expectations high?
Well, no, so they weren't especially high. I mean, I didn't think it would be terrible, but, you know, obviously Disney was going to put money into it. And but it's hard to imagine, even if you don't care, for instance, for Bert's Cockney accent in the film, or different elements, the animation that gets a bad rap or whatever, it got solid musical numbers and great performances by all of the actors, really. So it's hard to imagine anybody other than Julie Andrews, for instance, as Mary Poppins, and it's hard to imagine it being quite a joyous experience as the first one.
Yeah, I was sort of had the same idea, you know, because originally I thought this was going to be a remake of Mary Poppins, that it was going to be exactly the same story with different characters and with different actors, and I thought, this is not a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, thank goodness, you know, that's not what they did.
Fortunately,
they were smarter than that.
Fortunately, they did a sequel, and you know, I think in that way, as a sequel to the great original movie, which came out in 1964. So many years ago, really. We're talking about, you know, over 50 years ago that movie was made. And now, in 2018, they come out with some sort of a sequel. When I heard it was a sequel, I think my expectations, which were low, kind of became a little higher. You know? And I thought it was a good idea not to remake the movie, but to do a sequel. And I think in that way, the movie was more successful, or the movie as it is more successful than it would have been had they decided to just remake it the way, you know, sometimes they do a remake of a movie that's a classic, and it doesn't come out as well.
Definitely. I mean, they do try, even though it's a sequel, to maintain some of the I don't know, elements. Even in terms of plot, they have certain categories of things that take place in the new sequel that kind of fall into the same line of the plot. Not in every way, but in many ways, as the first. The plot of the first.
Yeah, and that way I think they're trying to build bridges between both movies, and I think that's a good idea because, as you said, the original movie from 1964 is so ingrained in people's minds. You watch it as a kid, and then you keep watching it when you have your own kids. The way it happened to us.
Right.
I think I must have watched the original Mary Poppins countless times when I was a kid, but not as many. Right. As I have recently with Libby, so I think it's a good idea to try to link both movies in such a way that people that have seen the original one will be able to make those connections as well.
Yeah, they did a good job of that. Without going so far as to turn it into a remake.
Now, Mary Poppins Returns is also a Disney production. Sometimes with Disney productions, you never know what to expect. The original one was, I think, a great production made around the time when Disney was making some really good children's movies with actors, not cartoon movies. Thinking about movies such as the one about the millionaire,
the Happiest Millionaire.
The Happiest Millionaire, and several others. But I think they did. I think for this movie, I don't know if you will agree with this or not, but I think they did a good job at picking both the director, which is Rob Marshall. Rob Marshall made movies such as Into the Woods, and one of the installments of the Pirates of the Caribbean and Memoirs of a Geisha several years ago. I pronounce geisha.
I say differently, but
the way I do, the way Hank Lachlan does.
I don't pronounce it, in the Japanese way either. So I don't think I'm.
And
right.
Also Chicago, which is
and this is a musical, so I actually think Chicago is a recent musical turned movie that was well done.
Yeah, and I think that experience with a recent musical is a good experience to have to go into making a movie like this. So the director was well chosen. The actors, for the most part, I think they do a fantastic job. Let's review who's in the movie. We have Emily Blunt.
Yeah. I thought she was fantastic. She did a great job.
As Mary Poppins, and that's not easy. That's not easy because
like I said,
Julie Andrews,
You can't imagine anybody other than Julie Andrews. I mean, maybe you can, but when I think of Mary Poppins, I have Julie Andrews in my head.
And then we have Lin-Manuel Miranda of Hamilton fame, and he plays Jack, which is sort of like the Bert of the new version, and I think he's fantastic as well.
Yeah, he did a great job too. They kind of slightly alter the dynamic between Mary Poppins and Jack from what it was between Mary Poppins and Bert, although it's similar, but it's a slightly different scenario. In this new film, but they're still a great pair.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then we also have Jane and Michael Banks, who have actually grown up, and are facing their own problems, which are different from the problems they had when they were the Banks kids in the original movie, and they're played by Ben Whishaw. I'm not sure if I pronounced that well.
I don't know.
He plays Michael. And Emily Mortimer plays
Emily Mortimer. I know
Jane.
her better than what is it?
Ben Whishaw. Yeah.
But I thought they both did a very good job. I mean, I've seen Emily Mortimer in a lot of films, and this part is not, it's not as big a role as Mary Poppins or Jack. But she's a solid character, and I liked that the couple that is at the center of the family in this film is not a husband and wife. And I think Disney actually sidestepped a whole lot of problems bringing a film up to date that's about a turn of 20th century values and issues into for a 21st century audience, because they had a brother-sister combination and they didn't have to deal with gender roles and issues along those lines with a married couple. And then Ben Whishaw, I thought, who's actually a widower in the film, did a very nice job. There are parts of the movie where he doesn't have as prominent a role, but he does have a song near the beginning, and I thought it was a very nice performance.
Yeah, and that song is called "A Conversation," I believe, and it's the one where he is conversing, singing to or talking to his wife who has passed away,
Right.
and I think he toes the line really well between the sadness, and without really making it maudlin,
Right.
without making it too over the top.
Well, and one thing that I think a lot of modern audiences say more and more as we've moved away from the sort of golden era of Hollywood musicals is that it's not natural for people to burst into song, right? Which is one of the reasons why a lot of people go, oh, I don't want to watch a musical if they don't already have a taste for that kind of genre. And I thought he did a very good job of making that moment seem natural, where he really is slipping in and out of talking to his wife and singing about his sadness, and I think that's very difficult to do in a contemporary film.
Yeah, especially because of what you say, that you have to suspend your disbelief, when you're watching a musical.
Right.
And somehow people used to watch a lot more musicals back in the 30s, 40s,
Right.
50s than we do
They
nowadays.
were willing to do it, and I think it's different in that moment too, because it's not a Mary Poppins moment where they're jumping into animation and being silly with the kids. It's a personal moment. It's a very grown-up moment, and so making a song like that work becomes much more problematic when it's a grown-up scenario and a serious scenario that doesn't have the excitement of an activity on screen to help it. So I thought that was well done.
Absolutely. And then we have Julie Walters, who's the housekeeper.
Yes, yeah. She's fantastic. I mean, she's been in so many movies and always plays great roles. Libby the other night was just watching Paddington, and she's also in the Paddington movies in terms of movies for children. I mean, she's been in tons of adult movies as well. But she brought a bit of entertainment. She doesn't have a huge part.
No, I think she has a smaller part than the actual housekeeper in the original
Right.
64 movie.
Right, but I mean, that's one of those elements like you were talking about where it tries to link the films and give some of the same structure.
Then we have a classic of movies with British actors, so he seems to appear on just about every other big production that is set in England. I'm talking about Colin Firth, who plays William Weatherall Wilkins, the bad banker, so to speak.
I think his part is one of the more conflicting parts for me. I'm a huge fan of Colin Firth. Obviously, he's known as, for many different roles, but I will always think of him as Mr. Darcy.
Yes, of course.
But, to me, the part was a little bit boring.
Very predictable, too.
Very predictable. That particular character, I wasn't overwhelmed with it, but... he plays it. It's fine. It's a part of it's a piece of the puzzle of the plot, if you will. But I didn't engage with it as much as, for instance, the bankers in the original Mary Poppins, and of course you have Dick Van Dyke playing one of those characters in the original, and I was very pleased to see Dick Van Dyke's cameo in this one. That was fantastic. But I felt like Colin Firth's character was there, and it was fine. But it didn't add that.
It was almost like another day at the office or a performance,
Yeah, I just I don't know.
We also have Meryl Streep, who appears in oh so many movies, and here she appears in a really minor role as I think the cousin of Mary Poppins, supposedly coming from Eastern Europe, and her name is Topsy.
Yeah, she was a fun character. It was hard to figure out quite where that scene was going at first, but it was a fun sort of surprising nonsensical moment. I liked that it was starting to give us a look into Mary Poppins's personal life. It didn't take it very far, so I don't know if we want to talk about that later in the discussion. But I thought she did a good job.
Yeah, particularly because that scene links both movies in that it links the new movie with the original movie's scene where Ed Wynn appears. They fly up in the air.
I love to laugh.
I love to laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. And actually, there's a song called "Turning Turtle" that she sings along with the rest of the characters that appear in that scene. I think one of the most interesting things in the movie, at least for me personally, are the two cameos that appear towards the end of the movie, really. First of all, Angela Lansbury, who has always been a favorite of mine, not just as Mrs. Fletcher of Murder, She Wrote fame, but as an actor that has had a really long career in American movies. And she appears as a balloon lady at the end because the theme of the balloon at the end of the movie sort of links the two movies by way of a balloon and the original kite.
Right. I liked seeing her. Again, it was a very small part, and in a way, it felt like she was in there just to have her in there. But I always like her, and she has been like you say, a solid figure in American film. There are a lot of things that I love her in, and going back to Gaslight, or I was trying to tell Libby in the movie theater because she wanted to know who that was. I said that she played Mrs. Potts in Beauty and the Beast, and she was in Nanny McPhee along with Colin Firth.
That's why I said before that Colin Firth's always
he is, he is. He's in a lot. So I was glad to see her there. It wasn't a very exciting role, for her, but it was nice.
And then another way in which the two movies are linked is the fact that the great Dick Van Dyke appears towards the end of this movie, and he's, of course, such a big part of the original Mary Poppins, and wow, is he in good shape still? Yeah,
it was fantastic to see him, and he actually... he dances a little bit, and it was really nice to see him there, and to see that he gets to have a part in the film still. I will say it made me want to see Julie Andrews make an appearance, and I know you had told me she declined.
That's true. Dick Van Dyke plays Mr. Dawes Jr., who also appears in the original movie as the head of the Fidelity Fiduciary Bank. And becomes important towards the end of this new movie, Mary Poppins Returns. But yes, Dame Julie Andrews, who is a fantastic singer, great performer, great actress, and part of the royalty of British film. She had been given the chance to appear in the movie, and she declined. And I think the reason why, what I heard about this, is that she did not want to rain on Emily Blunt's parade.
Well, I appreciate that.
And from that perspective, I think that she made the right decision, because it's so difficult to extricate yourself from the original role of Mary Poppins.
I do understand that, but I just had this lingering there's a bird. Where's Mary Poppins? But of course, Mary Poppins was in the film, and Emily Blunt did a fantastic job. But I just miss seeing Julie Andrews.
Yeah, so did I, and at least it was good to see old Van Dyke in there.
Yeah.
And it does make you wish that at least she appeared just a tiny little bit.
I think she could have played one of Mary's reflections in the mirror. That would maybe have been nice if they, and now it might not have made sense to children watching the movie, so maybe that wouldn't have worked, but I would have liked that.
This is a conversation on Mary Poppins Returns with Anton
and Erin.
And we're here in Jackson, Tennessee, sitting at our table in the kitchen and sipping on some warm coffee. You having yours with milk and mine with nothing, like old Jimmy Stewart in Winchester 73, sorry. We're talking about Mary Poppins Returns, which just came out a few weeks ago. Go to the theater to watch it, especially if you've seen the original one, Mary Poppins from 1964. I think another positive thing about the movie is, in a way, the music.
Oh, yeah. That's another question I think that, you have lingering before you go see it, like, what are the songs going to be? Because I will say that some recent musicals, and I'm thinking of one in particular that we've seen.
Would it be La La Land?
Yeah. Have been real disappointments in terms of the actual star of musical movies, which is the music, the numbers. I wasn't sure if they were going to take the time to write good songs and have good lyrics and, take the time to really put them together well, but they did. I was very impressed. It's not, to me, the numbers don't quite reach the level that the songs from the original Mary Poppins did, but actually quite a few of the numbers really felt like solid musical numbers, very catchy songs, really great singing. So I thought they did a great energy. I think that's one of the things that you notice in a musical. Does it seem like someone's having to sing a song because it's a musical, or is it just natural and it's full of energy and part of the whole experience? And for the most part, it felt very lively and in a natural way.
I think part of the problem, part of the challenge that they were facing was the fact that the original 1964 movie had music by the Sherman Brothers, the great duo of Robert and Richard Sherman. And of course, with classics such as Step in Time, Supercalifragilistic Expialidocious, and so many others. Let's Go Fly a Kite, Spoonful of Sugar. I mean, it's just very difficult to rise to that level. But I think Mark Shaman, who wrote the music and wrote also the lyrics along with Scott Whitman, did a really good job of keeping the style in the classic Hollywood musical tradition. It helps, I think, in a way that the movie was set in the 1930s, what in England is known as the Great Slump.
Right. I mean, they were able to continue that traditional feel because the time period allowed it. If it were a contemporary story, obviously it would be harder. I mean, and that's one of the issues with La La Land is it's harder to come up with like more genuine musical numbers to fit into a 21st century story.
Yes.
And I know there are plenty of people who have loved La La Land, but Anton and I are not among them.
No, for some reason I didn't like it as much.
I actually really disliked that movie, but I felt, like, and you may be right that the reason is they were able to work with the time frame, but it just felt very, very natural.
It also helps, I guess, that they had Richard Sherman himself as musical consultant. I saw that at the beginning. He's credited as musical consultant. Of course, the other Sherman brother, Robert Sherman, passed away a few years ago, so he wasn't on call. But I think it was a good idea to have the original composer of the music for such an iconic musical, really. To act as musical consultant.
The other thing, I mean, they took the time to do the numbers properly because I would say for the most part you can understand what's being sung.
Yes.
And there are times when people do musical numbers where you can hear everybody singing but you can't quite make out even what they're saying, whether it's too many people involved in the musical number who are singing at the same time or it's just not polished enough. and they really took the time, and I don't know anything about the kind of training that goes into that, but to make sure that you could understand the words that were being sung, and but it didn't look like people were laboring at it.
I think the fact they had Lin-Manuel Miranda, who's
they had
has so much experience on Broadway,
people.
And must have helped with that.
Right.
And it is really difficult to compete with the great songwriters of the Great American Songbook.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing they weren't trying to do that, but at least they were trying to stay within that same mold, and I think they did a good job with that. In fact, some of the songs I think are very good. You were mentioning A Conversation before.
Yeah, I was impressed with that one.
Was an impressive song.
Yeah.
And then there are some others that I like. There's one called Can You Imagine That, which I thought was pretty clever.
Very fun.
Well done. And I think one of your favorites was A Cover Is Not the Book.
Yeah. I mean, that was in some ways a livelier number than some other Mary Poppins songs, but it was very fun, and I thought they did a fantastic job with the song, with the performance. Emily Blunt performs that one with Lin Miranda, and their energy is matched, and they also took the time to really stage it in terms of both the dancing and the scenery and props and everything that went into it, because that's a moment where it's performed as a stage performance.
Yeah, it's a music hall sort of song.
Yeah, it's a music hall song. So you have a mixture of stage theater and the kind of magic that you see in a stage performance, and then also some of the magic of Mary Poppins mixed in with that. So
in a way, it reminds me a little bit of that Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, which is one that they sing when they, if I'm not mistaken, the original one when they jump into one of Bert's drawings.
Yeah.
In this case, they step into a sort of a vase.
Yeah, porcelain bowl.
Porcelain bowl, yeah, and I thought that was also very well done.
Yeah.
But we can talk about that a little later. I agree. I think that song, The Cover Is Not the Book, besides the fact that it has a good message.
Yeah. It says go read a book, basically, which is nice.
And then, we already mentioned Turning Turtle, which is sort of like a nonsensical song, but that's what it's supposed to be.
It was fun, and it had 3 adults and 3 children, and, it had, again, it doesn't quite get to the level of I Love to Laugh for me, but it still felt very...
It latches onto that sort of
It does,
idea.
but I mean, it had good energy, and I thought it was well staged as well, because that part gets a little bit complicated when they go into Topsy's house and everything's upside down. That could get quite complicated in order to stage it and take advantage of it, and they do several different things. One of which I think they could have gone further with, but to take advantage of the perspective in the room with everything upside down.
Just as everything was turning upside down for everybody else in that time period, and also for Jane and Michael.
That's one of the moments where they bring up an important theme about how as a child and then how as an adult you kind of gain or regain control of your own perspective on the world around you. I really liked that, but I did want them to take it further. At the end of that song, Topsy realizes that if her house is upside down, she can stand on her head and see it better. And then they all kind of try it, and they bring up that lesson, but it doesn't
carry on.
It doesn't carry on, and it doesn't develop quite far enough for me. I think they could have, again, I mean, they have a limited amount of time, but I wish they would have done just a tiny bit more with that.
We also have Triple Light Fantastic. That's one that you'll probably be hearing a lot about because it's one of the star songs in the movie. That's one I really liked as well. I think it's meant to link the new movie with the original version.
Yes.
or with the original movie, especially when it comes to all the chimney sweeps,
Right.
singing "Step in Time, Step in
Right.
Time," which
Right.
you know Libby liked so
Right.
much when she was a little girl.
Yeah, you know, that part in the original Mary Poppins is always, I don't know, it's complicated for me because when I was little, I did not like that song. I don't even know why. It was like, oh, I gotta get past Step in Time.
It's very long too.
It's long. It's a long number. On top of it, you know, as I grew up and I, you know, studied Victorian literature and I learned about chimney sweeps and all of the horrible things that
William
were
Blake.
happening to people. Throughout, you know, the centuries, really.
G.W. Reynolds.
Yeah, in England, you kind of go, oh, Disney, like, why?
Yeah, glossing it over and making it
I don't know. That
romanticized.
it was hard. But Libby, when she was 2 years old, absolutely fell in love with that song. And she wanted to watch it over and over. And we would spend time walking around the living room trying to step in time with her. And I mean, she wanted to do all the acrobatic parts. And so I learned to love that song because she loved it so much. So yeah, Trip the Light, fantastic. And this film definitely connects to that part. And I thought they did a good job. This is maybe the second to last song in the film. It's one of the moments that really highlights Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Yes.
And
because he is the lamplighter.
He's the lamplighter with the other Learys, and they dance and sing. And I really liked this part. I did feel like it was one of those moments where it felt short of the energy of Step in Time, because Step in Time is such a fast-paced number, and you know it creates the illusion of these great risks they're taking, and but it was still I really liked that they put that in there and that they had the big ensemble group of dancers, which is something that a lot of those old musicals did so much of, and I really liked how they included that. Yeah,
they were substituting, you know, the original, you know, brooms and the rooftops and the chimneys. They were substituting that with lamps, and the lamps also become part of the dancing routine. Right.
Well,
and I think that was very well done.
And the Leary's bicycles, which was also well done. You know, to emphasize the rise of the bicycle and that as a piece of technology that was becoming more and more popular for people. They emphasize that use. That this is one of the moments too in terms of choreography where they're able to bring a 21st century edge to it by showing some of like the bicycle tricks that they did in that worked. Which are
more like the X Games than they are classic Hollywood musical. But yeah, I totally agree. I did like the song, and I think that maybe even lyrically, Step in Time, Step in Time, Step in Time is a phrase that's easier to say faster than Trip a Little Light Fantastic.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And by the way, that expression, I only remember seeing that as the title of a Paul McCartney live album called Tripping the Light Fantastic, but apparently it has to do with dancing. The meaning of that expression, which I wasn't even sure what it meant.
Right, and we were looking it up, and
it goes back to Milton.
It goes back pretty far. Right? It goes back pretty far. But yeah, I mean, it's a coin of phrase that I imagine may have been quite popular at the time, and they make great use of it with that dance number. And I mean, I thought it was clever and well done. I don't know, that's one of the moments where they're really trying to look back at the original film, and so it creates that risk of you going, okay, well now I have to compare, and which do I prefer? Yes. But just the same, it was a fantastic number, and
yeah, I try not to compare it simply because I'm trying to look at this movie as just a different movie.
I agree.
You know, which picks up a little bit, not exactly where the other one left off, but you know that tries to kind of use the other one as a springboard to create something a little bit different, although similar at the same time. I
will say this is one of the moments too, though, where you maybe notice the difference in the dynamic between Mary and Jack and Mary and Bert, because I feel like in Step in Time there is more of a chemistry between Mary and Bert, and they're more playful with each other. watching each other perform and trying to show off, and Jack and Mary don't have that. They are like a close team, but they're friends. There's not that romantic dynamic in there, because Jack has another romantic interest in the film,
which is actually Jane. Yeah, I was surprised about that.
That was interesting. I was surprised about that too. I have, I don't know, different thoughts about that, but so that may also be something that just made me kind of go, not that they had to have that romantic dynamic, but it made Bert and Mary a little bit more playful together in the original Step in Time.
We got two more songs quickly. One that I didn't like as much is one called The Place Where Lost Things Go. I mean, I think lyrically it's a nice song, but it is a little bit overly dramatic, which is what A Conversation was not. And this one is definitely not one of my favorites.
Yeah. It was all right. I thought it was, this was one of the moments where Mary Poppins is really trying to give the kids a lesson to help them, because they've had nightmares. They're missing their mother who has died. And I felt like it was important that, they needed to have some sort of very deep moment with her. But I agree it was a little bit more forced than the Conversation song that we had earlier. I don't know, I felt like maybe the song could have played less of a role, maybe have the beginning of a song, and this could have been a moment I would have liked where they moved out of the music and had a little bit more personal dialogue. And I don't know if you agree with that or not, but the film, I felt like, didn't actually have a lot. It didn't emphasize dialogue quite as much as the original movie.
Absolutely.
And in that way, it fell short of the character development a little bit with some of the characters compared to the original movie. And one of the things that we learn about the children early on is that they have started to grow up too quickly over the course of the past year because their mother has died. And everybody's a bit concerned about that, including Mary Poppins, and so she does all of these things to try and get them to become children again. But then they go through this episode in the porcelain bowl where they're actually thrown into another situation that's very threatening and difficult for children to deal with, and they wake up from the nightmare, and we get this song about this place for lost things. I would rather have had just a mixture of a bit of a song with some more personal dialogue that was ever so slightly more direct with the children about that struggle that they feel like they need to be adults and they don't yet.
The idea that in a musical not everything has to be conveyed through song and music, there should be, if you think of great musicals like Singing in the Rain, for example, there's quite a bit of dialogue in there. Yeah. Even in the classic Fred Astaire ones.
Right.
The dialogue is not eschewed in favor of the music,
and sometimes,
but they complement each other.
Right. They complement each other, and they can make the moment more personal when you get to the dialogue. And they don't need to be adults yet, and yet clearly they are facing things that are incredibly difficult for them to handle, and they're not equipped to handle it. And so I wanted them to go, okay, let's have a moment to really talk to the children. And they never quite did that. And so that was one thing. And I'm saying this while completely praising the film, that I just wish they had adjusted a bit.
There's a finale as well. In the original 1964 Mary Poppins, the finale is Let's Go Fly a Kite, which is really one of the most memorable songs, both melodically and lyrically and even dramatically is one of the most important songs in the movie. We also have a finale here, which actually apparently quotes both A Spoonful of Sugar and Let's Go Fly a Kite. And it's called Nowhere to Go But Up. I like the song, but I think that you have your qualms about it.
I do. I think there was something about Let's Go Fly a Kite that, it's one of those moments where, Disney's using everything they can, music and what have you, to pull on your heartstrings, but it worked really well, and there was something very uplifting about the whole family going out to fly the kite when he's realized they're not falling apart as a family anymore. Now, of course, the difficulty in that moment, and I find it's a kind of an issue in this movie too, is that he doesn't lose his job, they don't lose their home, and the message, I don't know, is you have to be able to keep your high-paying job and your expensive home to be happy. I don't think that's the message, but it's it comes in that package in the end of the Disney movie. But just the same, that song doesn't emphasize that. It's a song for rich or poor. Let's go fly a kite. The point of the song is, you can find simple moments of happiness with your family. And I just, in terms of the message and the lyrics, I love that song. And in, what's this new one called?
It's called There's Nowhere to Go But Up.
Nowhere to Go But Up. It's the same idea. And it replaces the kite with the balloon. Although the kite is in the remake.
Yes.
And it actually, to show what an important part it had in the first film, it's throughout the entire movie. That the kite is still there. So,
yes.
I think that really emphasizes how important it was as a symbol from the first movie. But the balloon still is supposed to sort of take its place. I liked it, but I didn't feel it pull my heartstrings, which, again, that's kind of a silly, it's a manipulation of music and what have you to get your emotions going up. I enjoyed it, but it just didn't have the same impact for me.
And I think in a way, even melodically, Nowhere to Go But Up doesn't really sound to me much like a finale sort of song.
Yeah.
It sounds like a song that maybe if you put somewhere else in the movie could work well, but it just does not have the oomph. It just does not have even the melodic quality that Let's Go Fly a Kite has, and I think that's why it works so well. It's the music and the lyrics as a really good song to finish the movie, and I don't think that this one, even though I think it's a good song, it's not a bad song at all.
No, it's not a bad song.
But it doesn't work as well as a finale sort of song.
And to go along with that, I think one of the issues with this film to me is that and this is kind of unfair because it's not, I don't like the idea that every story needs to have a moral, so that's not quite what I mean, but there was a pretty clear message in Mary Poppins, about how Mr. Banks was paying attention to the wrong things.
And also a timeless sort of message.
Yes, he was prioritizing the wrong things, and his children were growing up, and he was missing it, and so when he comes back and they go together to fly the kite, you feel like he's learned to appreciate his family, and they've all learned to appreciate him. In this,
it's coming out of the Victorian period.
But in this one, I think there are messages, there are lessons to be learned, and yet they aren't fully developed. And I don't mean it has to be in a completely explicit way, but again, like I said, the children, what's the message for the children? They need to not grow up too fast, but then what do they hold on to in these difficult times? That's not really filled in.
And how can you not grow up fast in those difficult times? Just think about the people growing up in the Depression.
Right, and to give you a perfect example of how they don't see that through, when they go to Topsy, they want to get a bowl fix that they broke for their mother. I have two problems with that. One, they don't go back to Topsy, so we don't quite know what becomes of that situation. But two, it emphasizes the fact that she's going to fix a broken bowl, which I kind of think is the wrong message, especially for children dealing with difficult times, is, this fantasy that you're going to fix the things you broke. I don't know, that was frustrating for me. The other thing I would say is, what is the lesson for the dad? Now, I get that he sort of realizes as time goes on that he's been trying to take care of the kids, but the kids have been taking care of him, and that he's been too worried about money as well, and he needs to relax and what have you. But there was not as clear a message in terms of, the adult characters either. And that kind of goes along with Jane and even Mary Poppins. There's this discussion about workers and, Jane is a single woman in the early 20th century. I mean, that had a lot of complicated issues with it, which I understand they don't want to bring all up in a Disney
And they might
movie.
take care of that, with Jack.
With Jack. But I mean, there's the class issue between Jane and Jack. And then they even suggest at the beginning of the movie that Mary Poppins, who maybe she is just a governess who's out of work, she needs help. And they bring up a lot of complicated things, but they don't resolve them, which is okay. And yet I felt like they could have maybe left some things unresolved while still sort of crystallizing more of a message there that they don't quite get at. And I think you can feel that with Nowhere to Go But Up, because it just didn't have a sense of relief from with a clear message.
And it's really true that, with the times being so hard, there really was for them nowhere to go but up, because they were about to hit rock bottom.
Oh, and so then the other thing is, and I'm sorry, I've been going on and on, but I kind of decided at one point I really wanted them to lose the house. I mean, that sounds terrible, and it's a Disney movie, so I guess I kind of knew that they wouldn't lose the house. But again, it goes back to this idea of, well, the bowl's broken and it has to be fixed, or we're gonna lose the house. We can't lose the house. Well, you can, and plenty of people did.
And still do.
So does the message have to be, we found the bank shares and we don't have to lose the house? I maybe that's too much for a Disney movie, even in the 21st century, but I was disappointed because I didn't want it to be like, oh, we have the house, we're saved. And I thought for a little bit they weren't going to get to have it. And I was hopeful, but they got the house in the end.
You're listening to a conversation on Mary Poppins Returns, the new Disney movie from 2018 that just came out a few weeks ago. Go watch it at the theaters near you or far from you, wherever you go to theaters to watch movies. This is a show with Anton
and Erin,
recorded live in our kitchen as we're about to finish our coffees here after lunch in a very cold afternoon here in Jackson, Tennessee. This show will be available on my YouTube channel, Anton GF, very soon. And as we wind down the conversation, Erin, I would like to talk a little bit about the importance of Mary Poppins in this sequel as opposed or compared with the importance of Mary Poppins in the first movie. I think that one of the nice things that this movie does is the fact that it tries to link, of course, I said that before at the beginning, itself with the 1964 classic. But also the fact that it keeps some of the key characters, like Jane and Michael, who now have grown up, and of course the main character from the title, Mary Poppins. But I think the fact that this movie is as much about Jane and Michael as the original one was is a good thing.
Yeah.
But I feel like the character of Mary Poppins as portrayed by Emily Blunt and the character of Mary Poppins as portrayed by Julie Andrews are quite different. And I think not just because of the way the one sings and the songs that they sing or the way that they portray the character, but I think the character itself in this sequel, in this new Mary Poppins movie, is quite different. I don't think that in the sequel there is as much of a protagonism for Mary Poppins as there is in the original movie. Because, and maybe this happens because we as spectators already know Mary Poppins. We have seen the original movie, maybe we've read the books by P.L. Travers. But also the characters within the movie, like Jane and Michael particularly, already know Mary Poppins. And so the role of Mary Poppins changes in the new movie, don't you think?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And I think in some ways, in the first one, Mary Poppins seems invincible. and all-knowing almost. That's almost part of her magic. As she comes, she knows what to do. She doesn't have to explain. I mean, these are bits and pieces of things that they repeat in the sequel.
Perfect in every way.
Right, and yet she's not portrayed that way in the sequel. I think she's portrayed in a much more subjective way, in that you see moments where she's thinking. You see moments where she's doubtful. You see moments where I almost want to say Mary Poppins has some angst. But
if that is possible in a Disney movie.
I know, but like you see that, for instance, in the vulnerability she shares, or she expresses in front of her cousin Topsy. You know, and Topsy pokes fun at Mary, and you see her as not quite. I mean, she seems in control, but at the same time, there are moments when she doesn't seem as all-knowing as she did in the first. She ponders before she acts more in this new one than she did in the first one, where she just seemed to know what she was doing and do it. And I guess I liked that in some ways, because then it speaks more to the adults watching the film.
Yeah, exactly.
About, well, how is she making these decisions? Why is she doing what she's doing? I did want them to maybe, and maybe I'm always asking for too much, I wanted them to take it a little bit further, because I thought that was an interesting element, and it made me curious. Like, I want to know more. Now, for all I know, they want to make more movies, and they'll pursue more elements of Mary Poppins in the future.
Well, actually, since you mentioned that, I read somewhere that there's a third Mary Poppins movie that might be going into production.
With the same people?
I don't know. I just know that I've read somewhere, and I could be wrong, but somewhere on the internet. Not everything on the internet is true.
I can see that they might do that.
But I have a feeling that it's very likely, and I have read that there's the possibility of making a third movie along with.
I'm not
this one.
usually one for like long series of movies. All I mean is. So if they do a good job, great. If they do another one. All I mean was that I do feel like they raised the possibility of her being a very complex, interesting character. Not that she wasn't originally, but you got more the child's perspective of Mary Poppins in the first one, where she just knows what to do and she does it. And even the adults are left thinking that of her. Whereas in this one, you get more attention put on how she's deciding what to do, not explicitly, but like through her visual signals and her expressions of doubt here and there.
And in a way, I think that might be because of the idea that in the 1964 movie, maybe we're looking at everything through Jane and Michael Banks's eyes, and now we do that again, but now they're older.
Yeah,
and so it's possible to see a different kind of personality or character traits for Mary Poppins than you did in the earlier movie. It's also true that over 50 years have gone by, and things have changed socially quite a bit. And so the producers and the script writers are trying to bring this saga into the 21st century, as you were saying before.
Well, I will say, for bringing it into the 21st century, I do think they sidestepped several things. And maybe they just felt like, I don't know, they couldn't bring themselves to deal with it in a children's movie. But for when you go watch the original, you see, and you watch the first song, Votes for Women, which is just a fantastic number and brings up a lot of questions about the complicated role that Mrs. Banks plays, which would be a whole other discussion. But you get the banner in this sequel a couple times. You see the banner that says Votes for Women. It's just sort of in the scenery a couple times. Jane, in many ways, is carrying on the work of Mrs. Banks because she is
an activist.
As an activist for workers in the city, but also, and this might not seem like it to everybody, but she's clearly making a choice, at least up to that point in her life, to be a single woman, which, at that point in time was, it would have been seen by many as a political choice. Mary Poppins obviously sort of challenged a lot of gender roles. I mean, she certainly did with Mr. Banks in the original, where she's the one who's kind of telling him what to do, and she doesn't have to explain herself, and knowing, you know, like who's in charge in the family, and there's all of those elements. But like I said, they sidestepped some of those gender issues because they made the couple in the family, Jane and Michael, who are brother and sister, not husband and wife. Mm-hmm. I thought it was slightly odd, though, that like they took all of that out of the sequel, when it's sort of, not that it needed to be in there exactly, but it's the Me Too moment, and they took out any explicit conversation about women's rights. Mm-hmm. It was in there, but they didn't really do much with it, and they could have put a little bit of that in there.
I think they probably did as much as they thought they could do in a Disney movie for kids.
But. I know, but I mean, hey, 1964, is that when the first one came out? They have votes for women in there. I mean, I don't know.
Absolutely. I think you're right. They could have taken it a little bit further in several different ways. Yeah. With this movie from a more adult perspective, to put more things in there that would appeal to an adult public.
But all that said, I mean, this is not one of those things where I'm, like, for instance, with La La Land, I could criticize that all day because I didn't like it. I really enjoyed this movie.
We can do a conversation with La La Land sometimes, but we would have to watch it again. I don't think you could do that.
But I really enjoyed this movie. It's just commentary, that I think there were just things that I thought of that occurred to me while we were watching it. But I thought they did a great job. It's a movie that stands up, it's not to me as, on the level of the original, but it stands, on its own.
I was going to ask you, just to finish as a sort of finale for our conversation on Mary Poppins Returns, what is your overall view of the movie? Would you recommend that people go see it or not, and why? You could do that, then I'll add to that, and then we can finish our coffees.
Sorry, because I think I kind of talk a little bit too much when I get going.
I must say, though, that Erin was worried before we began the conversation, thinking, I won't have anything to say. I haven't prepared anything.
I don't think I won't have anything to say. I just don't know if what I say will make sense. But
if it makes sense to you,
I'm talking anyway.
I'm sure it'll make sense to anyone out there.
Well, what I would say is I do recommend going to see the movie. I think it's a fun, enjoyable movie. I would, if you haven't seen the original in a long time, I would watch it before you go because I just think it adds to the experience. But I think the best recommendation I could give for the movie is that Libby loved it, and she's quite the critic. She doesn't like something, I think you'll know, but she, throughout the film, more than once clapped as she was watching the songs, and just truly enjoyed it. So I was really happy we got to see it with her.
It absolutely exceeded my expectations, which, as I said originally, were not very high, but it definitely did exceed my expectations. I loved the directing. I loved the choreography. I thought most of the actors did a fantastic job, and for the most part, the music is really good. It is well performed, and the songs being in that classic Hollywood mode that I like so much really pleased me exceedingly. So it's a movie that I would definitely recommend that you all out there listening to this conversation would just go out and watch, or watch it when it's out on Netflix at some point, or when it comes out on DVD or in Blu-ray.
100 times with your child when they want to see it over and over.
You very well may be doing that in a few years.
But it's a good one to watch 100 times. I mean, as far as that goes.
Is your coffee finished?
Yes.
Well, mine is as well. So that marks the time to say goodbye. I really appreciate you doing this, Erin. I had a great time chatting about this movie. This has been a conversation on Mary Poppins Returns, the Disney movie that came out a few weeks ago in 2018. And, of course, part of the conversation had to do with the music, part of it had to do with the acting, and part of it had to do with the directing, with the movie in general. And this conversation will be available on my YouTube channel, Anton GF, very soon. I hope you enjoyed, and if you do, or if you don't, write some comments underneath and let us know what you thought about both the conversation and the movie. We'll see you again before too long. My name is Anton, and right here is
Erin.
And we appreciate your attention. Bye-bye. So long, everybody.